it's good to know inspiration or testimony from the past. Peter talks about reminding ourselves of testimony. And when I look at the founders and I look at a guy like George Washington, which he's kind of that cliche, and I think we look at him and we go, yeah, that was him, but that couldn't possibly be me. He's just another man. I think my faith really changed when I fully comprehended what Paul says when he says, what I want to do, I don't do. And what I don't want to do, I do. And it hit me like a ton of bricks of like, oh, he's a human. He's not perfect. He's like me. He struggles with stuff still, even though he's writing out these epistles, right? And so I ended up putting that onto everybody. It's like, oh, wait, every single person, no matter great or small, really is a true human being who struggles with things.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 strength and health authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Strong by Design podcast. Coach Chris in the house, and super excited to talk with our guest Mike today, a friend that we met briefly at the Rise Up Con event that we've been kind of sharing all these terrific conversations from men and women from that event for the last several weeks. And this was just another human being that I wanted to connect with, and we unfortunately kind of ran out of time for a short 2-day event, but passed each other numerous times throughout the 2 days, kind of had each other, I think, on each other's radar, and then finally just said hello for about 5 or 10 minutes at the end and said, we got a podcast. And sure enough, he has a podcast of his own, and you'll learn more about that as we roll here. But to properly introduce our guest, he is Mike Sonneveldt, kind of like Roosevelt, but cooler. And he's the Chief Operations Officer at Self-Evident Ministry. And he is, I'm actually repping some of the gear right now.
Yes, you are. It's looking good on you, man.
I thought about this in the shower this morning. I'm like, what am I wearing today? Oh, I know. I'm podcasting with Mike. I'm going to wear the hat and the shirt.
We kidded you out for it.
Yeah, I got it there. So anyway, they have gear, and he is a national speaker. He's an author and co-host of the Self-Evident podcast, and no better person to podcast with than a fellow podcaster, because we usually aren't short on things to say. But if you're a new listener of the show, we welcome you to today's episode, but certainly go back. Gosh, we have hundreds and hundreds of past episodes. The last few recent ones have a lot of these Rise Up Con conversations from people that were at that first-time event in Tennessee. If you're a past listener of the show, we welcome you back. We thank you so much for supporting the show, and we hope you're continuing to share it with friends or family. If you hear a powerful conversation, something that's kind of, maybe makes you a little bit uncomfortable, or it's controversial, or it's a conversation you've been meaning to have with somebody that you haven't been willing to have, and the podcast would be a good starting point for you, because we do kind of go off in lots of different directions. Please do that, because that's the beauty of the podcast show, is going deep on something, on issues that we all. I'm a human being. I'm a husband, a father, a coworker, a friend, just like all of you listening, and I have the same thoughts and feelings about things that need to be discussed. And so that's why we have terrific guests like Mike on the show, to be able to go deep on these things and find out what they're doing in the world. And it's very exciting. I want to know more about Self-Evident Ministry myself. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast, sir, and it's now your turn to deliver a little bit of who you are, what you do, and I have a whole bunch of fun stuff to get into with you.
Absolutely. So where do I begin? I was born in 1986. No, all right, I'll move forward. It's all good. No, I appreciate it, man. And to your point, like, just as sidebar, when we were at that convention, the whole weekend or whatever it was, I was like, I need to go talk to these guys. I need to talk to these guys. And I noticed you were doing, podcasts in your booth, and I was like, I won't interrupt them. I know how that goes, right? Because
I wish you did. We would have loved to have you sit down with us, man.
Well, now I know. So next time, I'll be that guy yelling while you guys are trying to do an interview.
That's right.
But no,
that's what made it more fun. We've never done like live podcasts in an open setting like that, but it was actually quite entertaining.
I want to get more info. And I'm sure unless your listeners run podcasts, they're probably not really interested in this part. But I do want to talk to you more about that, because I was like, man, that's cool that they brought their whole setup. They're running and gunning. They're live at the convention, because we've done something like that. And of course, we're talking to we had a tablet and we were doing it, and we are going to record it that way. And of course, some disgruntled political guy comes up, and dude, we're in the middle of a, but I'll have to pick your brain on that. But we are Self-Evident Ministries. So the other guy, the founder, Massey Campos, he's actually at work right now. So he's an associate pastor at our church, Revive Church in Stuart, Florida. He founded Self-Evident, I don't know, it's about 8 years ago now. And the whole goal of Self-Evident really is like, okay, we were lied to as kids. And I'm going to go in an odd direction and bring it back around. We were lied to as kids, right? So especially the Founding Fathers, Constitution, America's independence, all of that. Like, I was always told, dude, Boston Tea Party, raised some tax on some stamps, revolution. And I was like, I never understood, okay, you're that mad about tea that you got to haul off and, start independence. Right? And we're told separation of church and state. So, you Christians can't go anywhere near government buildings. And, we're told, well, abortion is the law of the land and all of that. And so we kind of had that heart of like, okay, is this actually true, what we're being told, right? And so Self-Evident was really born out of, no, we're gonna instruct in the true history of the founding of America, the true structure of the Constitution, of the Declaration of Independence, what the founders were actually going for, and we're ministers of the faith, and we saw something that wasn't aligning with what we were being told, and what we always saw was, hey, these guys seem to have some type of faith. We're always told, well, they were all deists, they were atheists, they didn't want God anywhere near anything, and separation of church and state and all that. And we just knew that wasn't right. And so over these past 8 years, our passion really has been, okay, we're going to, through their own quotes, through their own writings, we're going to show people the faith of the founders. We're going to show how they originally structured America, the government, limited government, liberty, a group of people who shove off away from the king. They're like, we want independence. They tried to structure independence in there, and then at the same time, we're so passionate about the culture and where America's going. So we're very passionate about discipling people and bringing them up. We're very passionate about, hey, how is Christ represented in the culture? How do we fight this war against wickedness? And so we kind of got our fingers in a whole lot of different pies. But it's fun for us, man, because it's our passion. Our passion is like, ooh, there's a problem. Let's go there. Ooh, there's a problem. Let's go there, But all of it's kind of undergirded in this passion of history, this passion of faith, this passion of theology, and all of that. So that's Self-Evident in a nutshell.
That's amazing. All I can think of too, as you're talking about that, and is the start of the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God,
right?
And God is very much a part of the language of that era, the late 1700s. Most of those men were Christians,
right?
And it's, for me, and I know what you're saying, especially I think what's taught in the last several decades in the school systems to our young children, the separation of church and state, they were intimately connected back then. And And we've gotten so far away from that over the last 50 to 100 years and we've seen this massive erosion of what's true and what's right, and it's frightening. And so, yes, I just love your model. I love what you guys are doing and what you're standing for. And I proudly wear this hat and shirt, and I'll probably have to invest in some other of your gear there, because I just so believe in that, and that's what has made our country so unique,
right,
and so wonderful for so long.
And I think, I love the model that you guys have and what you guys are going after. And I think it aligns well in the sense of, like, for us to be who God intended us to be, right? For us to be all that he shaped us to be, like, it's good to know inspiration or testimony from the past. And the scripture talks to us about, hey, Peter talks about bringing forth testimony, reminding ourselves of testimony. And so I think it's so important when I look at the founders and I look at a guy like George Washington, which he's kind of that cliche, right? I get it. Everybody, George Washington. And there were plenty of other guys who were superb, upstanding men. But you look at him and you can't help but kind of look in awe. And I think we look at him and we go, yeah, that was him, but that couldn't possibly be me. Right. He's just another man. And let me put it this way. I think my faith really changed when I fully comprehended what Paul says when he says, what I want to do, I don't do. And what I don't want to do, I do. And it hit me like a ton of bricks of, like, oh, he's a human. He's not perfect. He's like me. He struggles with stuff still, even though he's writing out these epistles, right? And so I ended up putting that onto everybody. It's like, oh, wait, every single person, no matter great or small, really is a true human being who struggles with things. But and I think using the testimony of, hey, here's what you could do if you stand on conviction, if you have integrity, if you follow the Lord in obedience, if you're willing to say yes to what the Lord has for you, if you go forward in opportunities and challenges, like, sky's the limit of where the Lord could lead you.
Yes.
And so that's history to me,
Yeah. And we have a way of putting people on a pedestal, right, as if they're perfect. But we're all fallible. We're all human beings. And we all have to be constant, it's humility. Right. And as Frank Turek, he's a very popular Christian apologist. He's been on our show many times. He's an amazing man. And he says, when someone plays Beethoven poorly, who do you blame? You don't blame Beethoven. You blame the player of that music, right? So it's kind of like we have one model. It's Christ. That's it. And we're all trying to play that out in our own human experience, but none of us is going to get it perfectly right. Not George Washington and not anyone else. Right. But it doesn't take away from the great things that they are capable of doing.
Right.
And what you listening on the other end, what you, Mike, are capable of doing. We all are capable of great things. It doesn't mean that we're perfect or should be, looked at as like something, above other people. We're just, everyone has this ability to for greatness. It's just being able to step into that while understanding that, not letting ego blind you.
Right. And I think it's that figuring out what that aspect of greatness for you is, because not all of us are going to be powerful generals. And there's a lot of people who will point out, hey, Washington was a really great general. Yeah. By inspiration, he was a great president. But in terms of policy and all of that, and even he kind of made this argument of, look, I'm a general. I'm a military guy. I'm not a politician. And so it's great when a person can kind of find that lane or that purpose, and I would even ask you, who's somebody in history, and you can't say Jesus because of course he's given, right? Who do you look up to or admire as a great, and why? And I'm specifically asking you because I think it'd be interesting. I'm doing a little social experiment on you.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, and just because it just popped in my head, and I just saw an old interview back from, it had to be like 77, 78, 79, was actually Sylvester Stallone.
Okay,
and
cool.
This is the reason why I say it, because he's the ultimate underdog and the ultimate champion in one. And it's my favorite movie of all time, Rocky, the original. And Rocky 1 and 2 are kind of flow together very well. It came out in 1976, the year I was born, won the Oscar, and I think is still probably the best underdog story that's ever been on screen. But what made him so amazing was that he had such fight and such grit and was far from perfect. But it's that American spirit. He had a relationship with God. He loved his wife. He was coachable. He had a great coach in Mickey, and he was always humble, and all the way through. And what even makes Rocky better is that he doesn't even win.
Right.
In
exactly.
Rocky. He doesn't even win, and you still feel like he won at the end of the movie because of the way his character rolled through that experience. And I just, so for me, that he's been one of that, and I heard an interview, the reason why I bring him up is because I heard an interview back from that late 70s after he had success with Rocky. They were questioning him about the character, and it really portrayed his life. His life was kind of a lot of bumps and obstacles and things not going his way until finally he writes this amazing screenplay in like 2 days, by the way. He wrote that whole story and was down to his last nickel. I mean, sold his dog. That dog, Butkus, that's in the movie, that was his dog. He sold that dog to be able to have enough money to do what he needed to do, and he ended up buying the dog back. And it just, the story is just amazing, and I just find him to be an amazing human being.
I love it because you zeroed in on, hey, there's this aspect of underdog who, that whole Rocky quote of it's not how hard you can hit, but how hard you can get hit and get back up, right? Like that whole just perseverance and that drive and that overcoming. Like you could have said, the guy's got an amazing physique, which shows his discipline, shows his effort, shows his hard work in the gym. You could even say Rocky's boxing skills or his drive and physicality and all of that. You could say, throughout the movies, his overcoming and winning against, Goliath type opponents. But I love that you zeroed in on, it's that underdog story, that overcoming story, which was Sylvester Stallone's story kind of mapped onto that first movie, especially.
Yep.
And it's like,
and he fought tooth and nail to make himself that role. They wanted, when he brought it to people, they're like, no, we don't see you as the character. Huh. He's like, well, I'm not. It's either me as the character or nobody.
Which,
like he knew he was the perfect character for it.
Man, and that's cool because he stuck to his guns, right? Like I think a lot of people will go, well, I want to get the script sold. So if the people in charge are telling me I can't be Rocky, well, okay, I'll give you the script. But that self-assurance of like, no, I'm going to be Rocky. I wrote the script. I'm going to be him. It's me. Take it or leave it. That's conviction. And that's what I love about examples, whether from history or culture or even movies or action heroes or that kind of thing. Like, if I think for me, the first name that comes to mind is Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah.
And just the man not only took on enemies in Europe, but he took on the battle from his own people. Like every step of the way, the whole time, it was always people, kind of an underdog of like people always discounting him, discrediting. Nope, Churchill's no good. Even his own father was like, you're a waste of space, and this attitude of, I don't care what you say. I know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to do it. And it doesn't matter if nobody is behind me, I'm going to do this. And just that peak of standing in the face of evil especially, but standing in the face of so much onslaught and pushing against. And he won a nation over. And unfortunately, they kind of discarded him afterwards, and all that. But just that, and he was so smart. He so well spoken. He was so driven. And so I look at the guy and it's like, he's got a quote that I appreciate. If you stop to throw stones at every barking dog, you're never going to get where you're going. It's like, I don't know how many times that's informed me.
Yeah.
It's like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Okay, the barking dog. I got to keep going.
He has a lot of terrific quotes. We actually have one of them in our break room, a picture of him, and the quote, it's, success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. It's been said a couple different ways, but that's, it's that whole failing forward, fail your way to success type of thing. It's like you can't let one misstep or one mistake or one error, get you down. You can be an MLB baseball player and have the worst game of your life and your team wins, or it's always about being able to roll and keep pushing and not giving up and not surrendering, and I think that is the American spirit. That's the American story. That's what made this country so great, was all of these people from all over the kind of the world, right? You go back a few hundred years, people flocking and immigrating here, and hardworking men and women from all different parts of the world that wanted a chance at this new life and these freedoms that exist inside of this Constitution. And that's what this country has been built on, and that's what we see eroding, and what's is so frightening.
And that's it. And you nailed it. It's that individualism spirit, right? And we could get into like the weaknesses of that whole thing, but if there's one thing that I believe really drove America, well, two things, right? The first one obviously was faith and respect of God. Whether or not people actually believed Christ is the Savior, following Christ, dying to myself daily, whether they believed that or this whole term that's come around now, cultural Christianity, they at least have a respect of a higher authority, respect for the laws.
A theism of sorts, right? That there is at least a creator.
Right. And like at least having that baseline has been consistent in America for centuries. And we've gone up and down on how many people have actually ascribed to that, but it's been an ethos throughout, right?
I agree.
So there's that, and then there's individualist spirit. This whole government's not going to do it for me. Other people aren't going to do it for me. I've got to do it. And that whole like Western expansion, manifest destiny, all of that. Like my son and I are reading through Little House on the Prairie, and I love that Pa in the book, he's like, nope, too many people. He's in the woods of Wisconsin, and he's like, too many people. And there's like 2 people within 10 miles of him. He's like, we're going west, And you're like, and he picks out a plot of land. He doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't go down to the government and say, okay, I'm going to buy this. No, he just picks a plot of land. He's like, okay, starts chopping down trees and hauling them back and it's like, I think every guy deep down is like that. Like, if I could do that,
Yeah.
And
I agree.
I think that's unique in the American rugged individualist spirit of I'm going to have to keep failing in order to get to the success. And that's okay. And I don't think people do enough work with that. You know, we hear these quotes like the Churchill quotes or the Stallone quotes, and it may be a surface level of like, oh, yeah, I agree with that. But then we don't actually apply it to our lives. And the more we can take, whether it's history, whether it's inspiration from big figures or story or whatever, and actually apply it and go, okay, when I fall on my face, I just pick myself up and I keep going. Like, that's actually what I have to do day to day. You know, like our podcast, we scrape and bite for every audience member, right? And you hear about like these new successes, these overnight successes, and then you'll talk to the overnight successes and they're like, yeah, I'm a 10-year overnight success. You know, it's like,
that's exactly right.
I've been plowing hard for 10 years and finally
Yes.
it clicked and things went up a level.
Yep.
And I think people don't see that enough. They don't see the grind day in, day out and apply that to their own life. You know, it's like, oh, well, you know, that show or that podcast or that guy or that organization, they blew up. And it's like, there are some that hit the lottery, but the vast majority of them have been fighting and scraping
Grinding.
and biting and biding their time. And then finally, the failures and the lessons and the problems and the obstacles culminate in, hey, now the success has happened, or now the next level has happened.
There's so many examples of that. A comedian comes to mind, Nate Bargatze, who's become huge just in the last couple of years. But he's been a comedian for a very long time. If you go back, you can find old clips of him and you don't even recognize him because he was kind of young and pudgy and had dark hair and didn't, it's like, is that the same guy? Yeah, okay, that is the same guy. But he just finally, after grinding and doing probably small venues over and over and over again and refining his craft and getting better and better and better, he finally was in front of the right people, or what, you know, had that one show and talked to the right person, and then all of a sudden blows up. But he didn't just show up one day on stage and become a guy filling arenas.
No,
that I'm sure he could write a book about, you know, how long it felt like it took to get there, and we just see the end result. We don't see, it's the iceberg, right? We just see the tip. We don't see that huge chunk of ice under the ocean, you know, with that little bitty point sticking up out of the water.
Yeah, and it's funny because I know our conversation is kind of on a side trail, but this is the stuff that lights me up, right? Like, you know, and Self-Evident is very much like, okay, how do we give hope in such a dark world, right? And kind of our motto is like, look, there's nothing new under the sun, so we can have hope. And I'm a very practical application guy. So Massey's the founder, he's a very black and white guy, and he's very hard charging, right? He's like, we're going this way. And he's one of those that he sees hope where everybody else is like, it's off, you know. And at the risk of getting political, because that's really a big aspect of us, we were saying years ago, hey, Roe v. Wade's not going to last. This won't last here, right? And everybody was telling us on the conservative side, nope, it's done. I don't know what you're saying. We were getting laughed at, right? And then Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and it's like, you know, like there's hope that can be had, you know, and no matter what you're driving for, like there's still that matter of hope. And so where he's like a hope, we're going this way, I'm a practical application, and he and I'll laugh about it because it's like, he's like, we're going to the moon, and then so as soon as he says it, I'm the one going, okay, how do we build a rocket?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, you're like, well, he said it, so it's going to happen somewhere or another. I have to figure out
exactly.
how to do
we're going to have to do this, so I've got to go and build the rocket, and which is, that's my lane, right? My lane is like practical applicability. How do we take this thing and put this in, and how do we do this? and break down the steps for people. And that's where I think, hey, we've got hope of where this nation can go. And immediately my mind goes, okay, so now we've got to help develop every single person we can in this nation so that we can ensure that we get to where we're going. And so I think all of this is applicable, especially for the Christian that sees it all and they get overwhelmed, because the economy is going to collapse and who knows who the president is and the new world order and all of that. Is like, I'll tell a quick story that I tell this fairly often. So anybody who's seen me speak has probably heard this story. I was talking to a guy. I got done talking, giving a talk, and a guy came up and he goes, I've been a firefighter for 31 years. And he said, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, okay. I said, if you roll up on an industrial fire, big, massive industrial plant, I said, do you just start spraying wildly? He goes, well, no. Right. I said, you've got other guys on your team and you've all got a job and you stick to your job and you do what you need to do and you guys coordinate, but you have to have trust that the other guys are handling their job, right? And I said, that's what you need to do. I said, stop looking at the overwhelming picture. It really is that how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So we see all that going on around us and it's like, man, it's so overwhelming. I don't know what. Honestly, not your concern. It's God's concern. The question is, what are you doing that you've been called to do? What's your purpose? And how do you fulfill that? And that gets a lot easier because it's like, okay, I know for me, I'm not called to, I don't think I'm called to run for president, right? So that's not in my purview. I'm not thinking I've got to run for president so I can save the world. I'm not called to own a company that rivals Amazon. So, I'm a business owner. I've got my business, but I know what is the goal of that business? To help others, right? And so if I just follow my course in my day-to-day and I do what I'm called to do and then all of a sudden those failures that happen in my life when I fall flat on my face, it's like, okay, I get up tomorrow and I fix the problem and I keep going and I know God's the one who's going to do the rest. And that faith is really important of, in the end, he's got it and he's going to make up the difference. And I don't have to worry about his master plan.
Yeah. And he can use our failures,
right? Just
like he can use our successes. And that's what's so powerful. And we don't see the plan, the big plan, like he sees it, right?
No.
We're not meant to. We aren't capable. We couldn't comprehend it. But our paths are supposed to be bumpy, and I think it really it's to be able to have true empathy for other people,
right?
To know difficulty, to know challenge, to know loss, to know all of those things. That's what keeps us able to connect with other people, because if we had it easy, how are you going to really connect with somebody else who's had it difficult? And that's what makes life, I think, so sweet is when you have gone through, the champion who lost year after year after year, who finally wins. I mean, how powerful, how meaningful is that one championship? For that individual. So speaking of which, connecting and stuff, you do a bit of traveling. You speak at high schools, colleges, churches. What have you heard, or has there been kind of a shift in what you've been hearing in the last couple of years? What is that like? Because I get out there with people, but maybe not as much as you are in what you're doing. So what's it like at the ground level?
I think that's a really great question. I think in the past year, give or take, there's been more hope. And because for a long time, we'd go somewhere and you'd get either complaining or I'm just overwhelmed, right? And you'd get a lot of people of like, oh, it's all going to fall apart anyways, and it's horrible and it's evil, and and there was this kind of, I don't want to call it false energy, but I think overextended energy when President Trump was in office, because we go to a lot of conservative groups, we go to churches and all that, like you said, and so the conservatives especially, they saw Trump, and the problem was they all thought he was going to fix all their problems. And we were trying to say, cool, but he's not the one to fix all your problems. It starts with we, the people. It starts with us getting before the Lord, right? If this whole thing's going to change, it's actually God who's going to do it. And he could do it with using a man like Trump, sure. And so we got a lot of people who were like, he's going to fix the nation. Well, then when he didn't win and Biden got in office, you saw this like, oh, it's all going to fall apart. It's all going to fall apart. It's all falling apart. And I think in the past year, you've started to see people wrangle back because they watched COVID. They watched what happened at the granular level. And I think the perfect example are the school board meetings. We watched wildfire across the nation of people wanting to get reinvested in their local governance. Whether it's school board, county commission, city council, whatever, people were suddenly waking up to this concept of, oh, wait, my local government matters. And so I think in the past year, you've actually seen a lot of people start to wake up and go, I can do that. I can get involved in that. That's an area where I can have a little bit of effect. And I think the wheels are starting to turn. And so while the news, which is dedicated to making you feel doom, gloom, oppressed, horrible, right? Because bad news sells. People are seeing all of that, but there is still this growing energy of, now it's time for us to do something. Time for us to fight back in some way. Time for us to push, And so I'm really encouraged because we see more and more people who weren't necessarily open to faith, open to God, going, okay, all of that's crazy, and I can't fix it myself. I should start looking towards God on this. So you've got that, which is really encouraging. And then you've got the people who like, there's some hope and some energy of, hey, we're actually getting wins. We're getting wins at the local level. And so I'm excited to be able to keep doing tours because I love going out and I can talk to people who are hungry for real solutions. Because I think one of the things that drives me nuts when I go to hear other speakers or I listen to lectures or whatever is when I just hear, this is bad, these people are evil, this is awful, this is all going to, it's all problems. And they get a group of people there just to be reassured that everything's bad and the other side is evil. And I that drives me nuts because it's like, okay, I want solutions. Let's give solutions. I haven't done my job if I stop my talk and I haven't given you something that you can actually do or chew on or walk away with that helps the problem. And I think more and more you're seeing people hungry for that, which is awesome, which I think probably even 4 years ago, people were just tell me all the problems. You solve it, but I want you to tell me how right I am in how I see the world.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great explanation, and I think sometimes things have to get to a low point, or have to get to a point where there's exposure of things that aren't the truth, and for people to wake up. And I think there's been a lot of awakening happening between 2020 and 2024, and I think that's a really good thing. We may have wanted to see him maintain his presidency, but in terms of being that underdog, right, and fighting, and I'm not saying by any means, talk about a guy who's probably not, doesn't doesn't come to mind when you think of perfection,
Right.
in Trump. But when we elect a leader of a nation, it's what are what are their stances on things?
Right.
We all have character flaws and issues in our past, and things that can be, discussed and dissected and talked about, but at the end of the day, we're electing somebody that's going to lead a nation, and where do I fall on the big issues? Mm-hmm. And that's what people have to. They can't look at character stuff so much. They have to look at what direction is that person going to take this country, and for me, it's like a no-brainer. Right. Now, are there other probably great candidates out there that are strong men and or women that could do a great job leading this country? Certainly, but we only get two choices,
right? And
one choice just doesn't seem appropriate at all. And in fact, we don't even know if the guy is still breathing at this point.
Right.
I mean, it's gotten almost laughable. It's become like a comedy, and I can't imagine what it's like for the rest of the world looking at us, going, what is happening in this country?
I've seen skits from other countries. Like, I don't remember if it was Italy or France or something. And it was a skit of like the Secret Service guys holding up Biden as he's trying to give a talk. And it's like, this is how the world sees us, and mind you, this was 6 months ago. Right. And I'm with you. I think one of the things that we as the people need to do is, let's take Trump. Cool, you're the hard charger. You're the man plowing forward. It's our job to hold your feet to the fire, to keep to the principles that are important, right? And I think that's where we get off the train is we tend to sit back and go, oh well, he's got it, so whatever he says, good enough. And to be frank, like we've been disinvited from groups because we're not willing to basically say Trump is king. Like, and it's not that we don't like him. It's not that we won't probably vote for him in 2024, but we want to hold him to principle. So if he puts forward a policy that we're like, no, we don't agree with that, we're going to say it, right? And I think that's all the more respect to your leaders of doing what you can to make your voice heard on, this isn't the way this policy should go. Let's stick to the principle on this, right? And I think, what I find interesting about him is there seems to have been a big transformation in him, and I think it's ongoing. And there are people who have said before the attempt on his life and after they had conversations with him, and they've talked about how he talks differently after the attempt. And there's something different about him, which, heaven forbid, and it saddens me that it happened, the attempt on his life. However, it seems to have been a big catalyst in his life for transformation, because there's something different about the guy. Now, even before it, what I found interesting in the debate, just a little aside, did you notice he only pointed out Biden's incoherence once, which I completely different from him.
Yes,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Right?
Oh yeah, he would have been. It would have been a roast.
Right. It would have been
4 years
constant
ago.
Of this guy can't talk, this guy can't think, this guy is sick in the head. Who put this guy up to this? This old man. You want him? There was none of that. And he only made one comment, and I thought it was so well placed because it was, hey, I see what's going on. So he made the one comment, something to the effect of, I don't know what he said, and I don't think he knows what he said. Kind of a, hey, everybody seeing this.
And everybody watching is thinking that very same thought. And that's one of the reasons why I like him for his willingness to say what everyone is thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am totally with you. It's so refreshing to see somebody in politics just say it as it is.
That's correct.
And I think now he's had that ongoing transformation and that temperance of take your shot, but do it well, and point things out well. Don't just mock and ridicule him because you actually diminish yourself. And so I think this is a man that we're watching who is a different man from who he was in 2016 and 2020. And that gives me real hope because a humbled man is one who recognizes that there's something else at play than just his power to, strong arm the system, and I very much believe that there is a humility before God happening in his life where he can look at these things and go, where is God in control and what would God want me to do? Or what would the Bible say I should do? Or what would ancient wisdom put forward through Scripture say I should do? And that's a different process than the man that I think he was 8 years ago of, no, I'll do it. I'll fix it. I'm going to be the one to get it done. It's me who's going to do it. And so that's totally tally in his favor. And I think it's up to us to come alongside him and say, here's what Scripture says. Here's what the Lord's saying. Here's what the Constitution says you can and can't do, right? Here's what the law of the land says. Here's the Bill of Rights. Are you trying to transgress the Bill of Rights by getting done what you think you should get done? It's our job to come alongside him, and we need an informed populace. And so we need people to be informed on what does the Constitution say about what the president can and can't do. Like, we've turned the presidency into a king, as opposed to, he's just supposed to be a guy that can, handle relations between us and other countries. That was really kind of the position of the president, was just to kind of be that executive officer of, okay, handling the kind of structure of things and handling the relationships with the other people. That was it, and now we've turned it into a king where, oh, well, like Obama said, I've got a pen and a phone and I know how to use it. It's like, no, that's that's completely opposite of who you should be as president. President should be the one that we're paying attention to least, yet we've tried to make it a king. So it behooves us to come alongside whoever wins this, which, praying, hey, President Trump, and say, here's what the Constitution says. Let's get as much as we can of the government back towards this. And people will say, oh, that'll never happen. That's fine. Go that route. But I would rather have hope that this whole thing can turn. And like you said, sometimes it takes pain. It takes bad stuff, crisis, whatever going on for us to open our eyes and go, oh, wait, this really is a mess. We've got to fix it.
Yeah, we don't know what winning truly feels like unless we've done some losing,
right? That's a
and
great
some
way
suffering
to put it.
in life. I mean, that goes for all areas of our life. For you to really appreciate a relationship, that relationship is stronger when it's faced adversity,
right? Absolutely.
I think it's kind of silly enough, but I think of just a customer's journey when buying something. It could be anything, and maybe going through something difficult. Could be they bought furniture and it was a bad delivery experience or something, and then they spoke to somebody, a representative for that company, who helped them through that process. Even though that process wasn't perfect and didn't go as planned, but they helped to fix the problem. And do what they said they would do, and now all of a sudden they've created a super customer.
Right. Yeah.
They've created a customer that won't probably go anywhere else because of the experience that they went through. Even though it wasn't perfect, they felt that, oh, this company really will take care of me. That representative was amazing. That person's like my friend. They looked out for me.
Right.
Now, and so I think that's kind of life in a way. And just to get back at what you were saying too, I think there's a couple of issues there. Some people feel like the Constitution, because it's 250 years old, is dated or it's old. It needs a refreshment. This type, and I think that's really poor thinking.
Yeah.
Human beings are the same today as they were 250 years ago. It has nothing to do with the fact that we have a cell phone today. And the other part of it is knowing what the Constitution actually says. I think there's so many people that just don't even really give it any time, don't read it, don't know it, don't understand it. It's not all that long, actually, so it could be a good reading material for a few nights.
Yeah.
And lastly, you're saying something about that. Something that we were founded on. Our first president is George Washington, and he came obviously from across the pond, as they say. They wanted him to be a king.
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm not here for a monarchy." He himself said, "No, we presidents should just do a couple of terms, and then that's it." And that just shows you where his heart was at, where his ego was at. That he kept himself in check, and he said, "No, that's not what we're here to do. We're here for this amazing thing that we've created here, and it's going to take more than just me." We don't need kings. We need people, different people coming in and cycling through to keep this process fresh. And it's just a testament to like what what our founding fathers were all about.
Yeah. And I love Washington's outlook on it, because he was very much, I just want to get back to my farm.
Yeah, right. He loved it, right?
Yeah.
He loved his land.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. He loved where he lived. He loved the farm. He loved the quiet life, and he did it because he knew that's what he was supposed to do. So the power didn't attract him at all. Now, we could argue that the position of president had a lot less power at that point, but it was still a position of prestige and power. I mean, you're that guy in this brand new country. You're the first one, right? And like you said, there's something very tempting in the people coming to you and saying, we want you as our king. We want you forever, right? Mm. And when they were trying to structure the government, Alexander Hamilton actually came forward with a proposal of, well, let's let president be president for life, and this guy can just be it for life. And he even said, let's model our government after the monarchy in Britain, because, hey, the monarchy in Britain, that's really the best system there is. And everybody looked at him sideways. They're like, bro, we just came from that. Right. The biggest problem we had was uncontrolled power crushing us. And we finally have the opportunity to set up a system that can put checks and balances against that. And you want to go back to it? Obviously that idea got swept away real fast, and Washington was kind of that final nail in the coffin of, no, we're not going to have a king. We don't want a king, and I think that's the spirit of what the people need at this time. Now, to answer what you said earlier about Constitution, 250 years, I'm so passionate about, hey guys, the Constitution makes sense if we understand what they were trying to do with it. And I think people, they get caught up in the language and all of that, which, it takes a little time to start understanding the language, but really figuring out, okay, what were they trying to do with the Constitution? And once you figure that out, it kind of unlocks the whole system. And really what they were trying to do was take the states, which, if you notice that word back then really meant nation, right? The United States of America. And they had an argument about, okay, are we going to have a national government? So are we going to be one nation, or are we going to have a federal government, aka federation of states or a federation of nations in a way? And they agreed, hey, this Constitution will be a unifying document for how these states will interact with each other so that they can be represented unified to the world. Because they had France kind of breathing down their neck right after. Britain obviously wasn't thrilled with them after they had declared independence. They had enemies in the world, and so they had to have a system of where they as states could be unified enough on the world stage, yet still independent and sovereign in doing what they're doing. And we've forgotten that. And for a moment of nerdness, one of the amendments that I have the most problem with is actually the 17th Amendment, which took Senate races, and instead of senators being selected by your state legislators, it became a popular vote. And what it did was it actually changed the whole system, because the whole system was supposed to be, when Congress met, the House of Representatives represented the people as a whole, the population, right? The Senate was supposed to represent the states. So it was the state legislatures that determined who was going to be their senator to go and represent them as a state, right? So it was kind of this dividing line of, you've got the people's representation, but then you've got the states as themselves. It's basically like an ambassador going to D.C. to represent Florida. Well,
Right.
when the 17th Amendment got passed, what that did was that cut that off at the knees, and it cut out the state legislatures. So now all of a sudden, Florida itself doesn't have representation in Congress. The people of Florida have another level of representation in Congress, right? And you've noticed over the decades, really over the centuries, this clawing of control that the federal government has wanted to have over the states and what they do. And so most people, when they look at the Constitution, they look at it as a document of this is from the top to the bottom. What it really was an agreement between the states of this is how we will function unified. But the states were told to write their own constitutions. So why would you have a state constitution if it didn't matter anyways, because y'all were going by the federal constitution, right? And so that was actually supposed to be the difference, was as long as the state constitution did not explicitly contradict the federal constitution in terms of the federal constitution lays out these powers for the government, the federal government lays out these powers for the states. As long as there's no contradiction in there, you're good. Do what you need to do. But we've watched this kind of overarching power of the federal government come down onto the states and say, well, you're going to do what we tell you to do because we want to tell you what to do. What the states should be doing is saying, not in your purview, not part of the Constitution. The Constitution's very limited, easy to read. You don't have this power. Go back. But part of the problem is the states, and this was the 16th Amendment, was direct income tax, direct taxation. So now taxation gets pulled from the people, put into the federal coffers, and then the federal government turns around, hands money to the states when they do programs that they want them to do. But if the state doesn't do it, then they blackmail them with their own money. So you as a citizen of Florida are being blackmailed with your own money by the government if your state doesn't do what the federal government wants you to do. And I think you started to see, especially during COVID, you started to see states stand up and go, no more. No, I don't care what you threaten me with. I'm telling you you're doing this wrong. And I think we need more of that action of the states standing up and go, unconstitutional. I'm not going to hear it. I'll see you in court. You know, the more we get that, the more people can start clawing back what the founders actually intended.
Wow.
So
that's great.
So that's my history lesson for the day.
Oh man, that was yeah, you did nerd out right there, as you said. You said I'm gonna nerd out. I'm like, yeah, man, nerd out. I love that stuff. It reminds me of a quote from a recent podcast that actually just went up today with a gentleman, Adam Kovar, who was. Remember, did you walk around at Rise Up Con at all and see some of the booths while you were there?
Yeah, briefly.
Well, do you remember the guy with the fire pits? Had that cool, like purpley light coming out and had all these awesome stainless steel fire pits. Well, we spoke with that guy, Adam, and he's an amazing guy, Marine Corps vet, true patriot, and his story is just fantastic.
Awesome.
But his quote from the episode, we got to sit down with him for about 15, 20 minutes while we were there. He was our last guest before packing up on Saturday. And he said, small business, patriotic entrepreneurs are the solution to turn the tide back. And it just makes me think it starts very small. It starts with the men and women listening on this call who own their own business, right, who stand up and do the right things, at the ground level, and the way they interact, the way they lead the employees in their business, the way that they treat other people, the way that they connect to and network with other small businesses, and who they do business with and who they don't. And if more people are falling into, alignment in that capacity, all those little ripples start to overlap pretty massively, right. and that's how things really start to move. But it does start small. I love the small business man or woman, the entrepreneur, the hard worker. And it doesn't mean that I think, all big business is bad. I just think that, there becomes a bit of a power struggle there, and whoever's at the top, wants more.
Yeah.
And starts to dictate. And that's not what's made this country great.
I'm totally with you. It's the small business guy, right? It's that small business guy who goes in, day out, and he does his thing. And there's 30-second nerd out. There's what's called doctrine of lesser magistrate. And this basically says, it's the duty of the one below the higher level who is supposed to keep that one at the higher level on track, right? So if you get off, you do something illegal, or you're trying to, it's actually the duty of the person underneath you to keep you straight and narrow. So it's the state's job to counteract the federal government when they're getting unconstitutional or they're breaking a law, right? And it goes down that row. So then you have the small business owner where it's his duty and his job. If the city government with their compliance officer is getting outside the lines, it's the small business owner's duty to basically band together and push back. And no, you're not supposed to do that. That's not what the law says, right? And keep somebody in check. I mean, I was in roofing for a couple of years, and there was this one inspector who would make up rules on the spot. And so I was newer to it, and I was heading the tear-off crew, and I would call my supervisor, and I go, "Have you ever heard of this regulation?" He's like, "No, that's nowhere in the book. That's never been in the book." And it's like and this is insane because you get these people who trip a power. And so it's our job to go back to that building department and say, this is what your inspector is doing, and this is wrong, and this is what we're going to push against. And I love the small business owner heart, because that's the guy who's he's going in the trenches and he's doing it, and he's carving out a part of the world for him and his family. He's leaving a legacy to his children and his grandchildren may not ever be seen by the media, but it's that guy that spends 50 years running the tailor shop or the watch repair, or and he goes in, he does it diligently, and he's able to leave legacy for his family, and they look fondly on dad or grandpa who owned this business for 50 years and, did this thing for 50 years, did this thing for 60 years. And, maybe you're in it for 10 and you sell the business and you go to something else. Cool. There's still legacy built in that. And that's, mad respect to the guys who own the Amazons and the Teslas and all of that. Cool. But yeah, there's something about that small business guy down Main Street that is like, man, I love that down to earth style, you know?
Me too, man. I guess I connect to it better.
Yeah.
And I have so much respect for the hardworking person who gets up every day and grinds and provides for his family and has that spirit. And they're not seeking relevance or fake relevance, right? They're relevant because of the value that they add to their community, to their home, and to the people that rely on them, maybe, the 5 people that work for them or the 10 people or 20 people that work for them. And, I work for a company that has, about 20 to 25 people that work for it. And I'm honored to be, part of a great team. We have core values that lead us and guide us. We have 7 of them. And all business decisions are made by those things. And we can pivot very quickly and move in different directions because of our we're very agile. When you're small, you're able to really move quickly on things much faster than big business can move, and that's a super advantage. And I love it. It's and guidelines and things are in place to hold people in check, just like we parents hold their children in check when they're going in a wrong direction. We know that that's the wrong direction, and we try to guide them and move them and to go in the right direction. That's what that's what we're called to. That's our duty, and so that's what we're able to do. In our communities, everybody has a place and has leadership capacity, even if it's small. We all have influence.
Yeah.
And you got to remind yourself that you have influence, even if it's just over a few people.
Right. That's that results orientation that we can fall into, that trap of, well, I'm not affecting or changing enough people, especially if we don't see it publicly. And I fall in that too, but it
right. I only have 138 followers,
right.
So what I'm saying is not as relevant or meaningful as the guy with 1 million followers.
Right, exactly.
That's untrue.
Exactly, and unfortunately, it's kind of like Christ with the 10 lepers. He heals the 10, and 9 go off and they do their own thing, and there's only one that comes back. It's like, thank you, thank you so much. And it's like, you're only going to get that 1 out of 10 that's going to come back to you and say, this totally transformed me. This really helped. This picked me up when I needed it. And so you got to kind of create that thick skin of, I'm not going to worry about hearing about the results. I just have to keep sowing seed and pouring into people and discipling and doing my thing.
That's right.
And know that nothing returns void, right? So the Lord is using what I'm putting out there, and he's going to have an effect on people. And I can be rest assured that when I'm standing before the Lord, I get to see the total fruit of what I did.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that when we stand before him, we're going to see all of our deeds, right? Good and bad. I think some people think, I'm just going to hear all the bad stuff I did. No, he's going to show you the good stuff you did too. And you see how you said this to this person? Do you realize that this did this and this and this and this, and that actually saved 5 people?
Yep.
And we've got to have faith in him that, we may sow, but he's going to reap. We're just a part of the process, and we may not see the whole thing.
That's great. That's an awesome message, Mike. What can people do today to help support Self-Evident Ministry, what you're doing, and help restore some of this biblical value and truth, and kind of standing on top of the Bible and the Constitution in their daily comings and goings,
Yeah. So first step is, obviously, I'll give our plug. Go to theselfevidenttruth.com and just check us out. We've got blogs, we've got the podcast, we've got, we do have we're a 501c3. So obviously we run on support and donations. And so if you've got a heart to give, by all means, check us out. But I think the biggest thing for people to do is, and we want to help and give any resources we can, but is not just get informed. You have to get informed. So if you feel like I have no clue what the Constitution is about, I have no clue about American history, man, we've got resources for you. But once you kind of get your feet wet on that and you're starting to understand, the trick is really saying, okay, Lord, what's the step you want me to take? And I think, again, we kind of see so big picture. It's like, well, if I can't run for Congress, then I'm no good. Well, maybe what God's calling you to do is be a father figure to that neighborhood boy who doesn't have a father.
Yeah.
Maybe you're being called to raise your children so that they can be evangelists, they can be pastors, they can be the ones going out. And meanwhile, you can minister and raise up your employees or your neighbor, right? You may be called to something in that vein, and I think sometimes people think if it's not big, then it doesn't count. Well, you have to do the small first and be responsible with the small, and then God will actually grow your circles of influence. Yeah. And so I think our heart is self-evident is like, we want to give you the resources, but we also want to be able to come alongside you and disciple and teach and grow with you. And I get nothing gives me more excitement outside of somebody coming to Christ than somebody who goes up a level in their development, right? When I see somebody who's like, I never thought I would have stepped out and started a business 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's the type of stuff that gets me. And so, I will cheer you all the way, of like people, I call it autopilot. So many people are on autopilot every single moment of their lives. They wake up, they eat breakfast, they drop the kids off at school, they go to work, they pick the kids up, they go home, they eat dinner, they go to bed. And it's autopilot, 24/7. Yes. And when you see somebody break out of autopilot and they try something new or they push against themselves, their habitual self, and they push out because they know I've got to push out and overcome the challenge in order to get to a spot that I've never been before, man, that just floors me. So if you want me to smile, because you should want to make me happy, I love hearing those stories. So send those stories to me. I love hearing testimonies of like where people were and where they get to,
I even, I can get complacent too, and I can get caught up in the day to day and, wake up, go to sleep, wake up, rinse and repeat. And then I have to kind of correct myself and shake myself to get back into like what matters, get back to getting on my knees and praying and reading my Bible before I start my day of work, or just praying over the business, over the people, over my family, reading a book instead of scrolling on my phone, like all of those things, right? It's easy to have these default moments in life, and you got to just recognize them and be okay. Hey, I'm human. It happens. Right. We like comfort, right? And and then jump back into what makes you uncomfortable, or learn something new, a new skill, or something that you've been putting off. It's such a great way to look at things, and every day is a new opportunity, a new chance to do it. Yeah. God gives us 365 days every year to be a better person.
Amen to that.
And it's an honor to be able to sit and talk with a man like you, and obviously you're just a terrific resource. I mean, I feel like I just got a Constitution 101 learning experience here today, which is so fun. You're going amendment by amendment with I mean, this is great. It's like grade school stuff. But before we go, and I'll share your links again to your website and other places. I wanted to just share what your vision and mission is. That's on the selfevidenttruth.com website. And I thought it's great and it's worth sharing. And it probably seems more cooler if I read it than you. So the vision of Self-Evident is to see all citizens become a productive member of the United States of America, to understand the founding documents, and to realize that God gave us rights along with the morality to keep those rights. And their mission is to bring the truth of the Constitution to Americans by way of workshops, speaking events, and unique curriculum to educate all Americans on what their constitutional rights and freedoms are, and to connect those rights to the freedom that can only be found in a relationship with God. And obviously, much of our conversation today has been all about what those two things say. And I think that just really captures the essence of today's conversation, and just so appreciate what you guys are doing. And it's just, it's so, doesn't it feel good to know that there's other people doing stuff that gets you excited? And it just, I know you're reaching people and changing lives with your content and your speaking and travels, and it just feels good. It feels good to have another brother out there who's just grinding and doing something good.
When I saw your guys' booth, I mean, that was the first that I had been introduced to you guys, but it was like right away, I was like, yes, somebody else. Somebody else is, it's a, man, that's that whole prosperity, poverty difference, right? Like you look at people who are in a similar vein as you, and you can go, oh, that's competition, or like, cool, somebody else is helping, somebody else is pushing forward, somebody else is in on this. And so I'm honored to be chatting with you, brother.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. So as I said, folks, go to theselfevidenttruth.com to learn more about what Mike is doing there. And they do have, obviously, Facebook and Instagram and all of those things. It's the same thing. You're just going to look for Self-Evident Ministry. Yep. Type it into whatever platform that you're on, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and you will be able to learn more about Mike and his team there. I look forward to continuing to follow you guys, and it's just been such a pleasure to have you on the show today, my friend.
No, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
Been great. Listeners, as always, another terrific podcast here, a conversation hopefully that has changed you in some way. We ask you to do one thing: share. Think of somebody you could share this with, a friend, a family member. It's a powerful conversation with a lot of good nuggets, I think, and I'll enjoy going back and listening to it when it finally hits live here. And it's just always just such a pleasure to have a conversation and to be able to share it with our audience. We thank you for supporting the Strong by Design podcast. We look forward to talking with you again next week. A new episode drops every single Wednesday at 6 a.m. We'll be back, and God bless you. Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.